President Biden entered the White House vowing to become the most pro-union president in American history, and he worked to deliver on that economic vision. Under his presidency, Americans seeking to join a union, they doubled. The United States created more than 16 million jobs. The unemployment rate hit its lowest level in more than 50 years, and he secured the pensions for more than 1.2 million workers and retirees. Well, last week, Acting Secretary of Labor Julie Su honored the president, inducting him into the department's Hall of Honor. And Acting Labor Secretary Julie Su joins us now.
Madam Secretary, it's great to have you at the table again. Good to see you. The legacy of this president, I think, has gotten clouded around a lot of silly conversation around age and elections and all of that stuff. At the end of the day, he has shown himself over his course of leadership, to be dedicated to some very important fundamentals, which played out in your department, getting people back to work, creating jobs across the country. I want to call to your attention, for example, in the small business area, which is one area that's particularly important to me when I served in office and even since. 20 million new business applications, business ownership doubling among Black households, business ownership at 30-year high for Hispanic households. New businesses created by Asian Americans hit a 30-year high. These storylines are not on the front pages of Politico and The Hill and The Washington Post. So your department taking the extraordinary step of inducting him into that Hall of Honor was a way of sort of enshrining, if you will, that legacy. Speak to that a little bit for us.
Never before has a president wielded the power of his office so unapologetically on the side of working people. Everything from the very outset, when he said to Amazon warehouse workers from Bessemer, Alabama to Staten Island, New York, you have the right to organize, full stop. That right is yours, without interference, without coercion. And then he made good on that throughout his presidency. He has made he was the first sitting president to walk a picket line, right? Throwing the weight of the presidency behind labor's oldest and most fundamental exercise of power and resistance. He made very clear from the beginning that we were going to enforce labor laws, and as a result, we've put over $1 billion in the pockets of workers, money that they earned. You mentioned pensions. When workers worked their whole lives for retirement, they should get to rely on that retirement. I mean, he also said very clearly that when we put out federal dollars, they're not going to be blank checks. We're going to make sure that we're not just repairing roads and replacing pipes and building factories, but we're building lives by ensuring that the jobs that are created are good jobs. Presidents often measure their success by the number of jobs they create, and on that measure, President Biden has been wildly successful, especially given what he inherited. But the idea that the jobs have to be good jobs, family-sustaining jobs, union jobs, is something that he has shown is possible, and I think that has just shifted the playbook fundamentally. And he will now be in the department's Hall of Honor, where his story will continue to be told alongside those very workers that he has advocated for his whole entire career.
Madam Secretary, this week we heard the president talking about the legacy that you just detailed, but also about what he called the onslaught that is forthcoming. Take a listen.
We push for a right to a living wage and a right to overtime pay. Jobs and factories are coming back home to America because we invested in an American agenda. We're modernizing American infrastructure. So much is going on. But it's going to take a little bit of time. But we got to make sure to protect the onslaught that's going to come.
I wonder what protecting that onslaught looks like. I wonder how much of this legacy you feel is vulnerable to the incoming Republican administration, and what workers all across this country should be preparing for in the next 100 days and 6 months.
Look, so part of the legacy is that the president has said that he believes in collective bargaining. He believes in the power of unions. And on his behalf, I've been at the bargaining table more times than several of my predecessors combined, not just to try to resolve disputes, but to try to make sure that contracts actually reflect the real value that workers bring. And those gains, those historic wage increases, the health benefits, the retirement security are locked in. Those are contracts, and it demonstrates why working people having the power to to have a say in the conditions of their workplace is so important, right? This is not just a role for government. But what President Biden has done is rewritten the playbook for what government's role can and should be. And you know, the job is going to be of all of us to hold that government accountable to it. He has attacked the notion of trickle-down economics head-on, right? The idea that working people are just supposed to wait patiently while CEOs get rich. That's not the vision of the economy that he's had. That's not the vision of the economy that we've tried to build. That's not the vision of the economy, one that just works for billionaires, that's gonna carry this country forward. And the work of building that economy, no matter who's in office, is all of our responsibility.
You know, the president's economic message is actually more of a populist message than we actually, I think, that have been written about and that is talked about. And the way that you're talking about it now, the way that I used to hear him talk about it when, you know, I worked for him in 2020, it sounded just like that. Some people could listen and say, well, that sounds a little Bernie Sanders. It's got like a touch of Bernie, but it is quintessential Joe Biden. I was struck by, you said this about the president, said history will record Joe Biden as the most pro-worker, pro-union president this nation has had. I think that is true. This pro-worker, pro-union, and this post-conversation about what happened in the election, what happens going forward over the next 2 and 4 years, there has been all this talk about a focus on working people, or the lack thereof that Democrats had, and you just laid out that the president has had a laser focus on working people. But I think that's not talked about as much as how there is this dichotomy between unions and workers, and what you all have said, you don't have to choose. Like, you support unions, but you support working people. And all working people are not members of unions. That's and right. when people talk about seeing themselves in what government is doing, I also think it's about the language that is being used and how people are being approached. So whether you're a union, you're a working person, this Labor Department says you have a place here.
That's right. And it's also one thing to talk about those things. It's a very different thing to deliver on them. And I think it's right. You know, workers having a seat at the table is really important, but for the vast majority of workers in this country, they don't, right? They work in vulnerable circumstances. I've sat down with workers who are dying because of heat, something that is totally a preventable, cause of workplace hazard. And we have now put in place a proposed standard to protect workers from the hazards of heat. The question will be whether the next administration finishes that work. And we've also said, we've walked into many, many rooms and sat down with working people to say that where you don't feel like you yet have power, you should feel like your government is on your side. When your rights are being violated, when you are experiencing wage theft, when you are not able to go home healthy and safe, there are laws that protect you. And it is the Department of Labor's job to make sure that that we breathe life into those laws. And that's something that we have done over and over again, because the president has said that we want to see, hear, and fight for workers across this country.
Madam Secretary, before we let you scoot out of here to begin to enjoy your holiday, what's next for you? What's your legacy look like, the imprint that you've left on this Department of Labor?
Well, if I could say something about just this department that I care so deeply about and I've been so proud to lead, it is a department with about 15,000 career civil servants who come to work every day knowing that working people depend on the department to be strong, knowing that they depend on the department to take serious the job of stopping child labor in its tracks, of making sure that all workers who should be protected are protected. And I said from the time I got here that I hoped that the department would unleash its full power to do right by working people. And I think once that power is unleashed, it's hard to put it back. And I will continue to support the important work that they will continue to do.
All right.
Secretary Julie Su, thank you so much for being with us.